Well, hello there. When we think of Hollywood, it's usually all glitz, glamour, and those dreamy happy endings, right? But what if I told you that some of the most brutal, honest, and truly gut-punching films ever made aren't about the heroes or the happily ever afters, but about the very machine that creates them? These aren't love letters to Tinseltown. Oh no, they're more like stark warnings. And most people, bless their hearts, completely miss them. These are the films that bravely pull back the velvet curtain, expose the cracks, and dare to show you the chaos, the lies, and the heartbreak hiding just behind that dazzling spotlight. We're talking about 25 forgotten classics that whisper the stories Hollywood really hoped you'd forget. The meltdowns, the burnouts, the sheer human wreckage left behind those red carpet smiles. So, are you ready? Let's take a peek behind the scenes.
First up, we have The Stuntman from 1980. This film is a wonderfully chaotic, almost surreal dive into the very heart of filmmaking madness. Directed by Richard Rush and follows this fugitive who, quite by accident, stumbles onto a film set and ends up becoming a stuntman. But he's under the absolutely manipulative grip of this egomaniacal director played brilliantly by Peter O'Toole. The film just blurs the lines between reality and illusion, exposing the psychological games, the power dynamics, and this intense obsession with control that really fuels Hollywood's engine. Interestingly, Rush himself fought tooth and nail to get this film made, almost mirroring its themes of creative chaos and the industry's hostility toward taking risks. Despite critical acclaim, The Stuntman didn't quite connect with audiences. Maybe it was because it dared to show the industry not as glamorous, but as a circus of manipulation, ego, and blurred identities. It really is a forgotten classic that reveals the paranoia, deceit, and existential confusion lurking behind the camera lens. It's not just about making movies, it's about losing yourself in them.
Next, let's talk about The Bad and the Beautiful from 1952. This one is an acid-laced look, and I mean acid-laced, at the studio system's seductive, soul-crushing grip on anyone brave enough to dream in Hollywood. Kirk Douglas plays this ruthless producer who burns every single bridge, exploiting and discarding everyone in his orbit. Writers, directors, actresses, all left broken in his relentless pursuit of power and prestige. Told through fractured flashbacks, the film really pulls back that velvet curtain to show you the bloodstains on the red carpet, where betrayal is simply a business strategy and ambition is, well, a disease. Directed by Vincente Minnelli during MGM's golden era, it's surprisingly dark, bitter, and cynical for its time. Despite winning 5 Oscars, including Best Screenplay, it's often ignored in modern discussions of Hollywood's self-reflection, perhaps because its criticisms hit a little too close to home. This isn't a love letter to cinema. It's an autopsy of the dream factory, showing how the industry feeds on human weakness and then just discards the remnants.
Moving on, we have Lenny from 1974. This isn't just a film about comedy. It's about the brutal price of truth in an industry and culture that just demands conformity. Directed by Bob Fosse, the film is a raw, unflinching portrait of Lenny Bruce, the trailblazing comedian who absolutely refused to play by the rules. Dustin Hoffman gives this blistering performance as Bruce, whose relentless push against censorship, hypocrisy, and the entertainment machine ultimately cost him everything. Shot in stark, almost voyeuristic black and white, Lenny feels more like a confessional than a biopic, exposing not just the pressures of fame, but the insidious ways the system silences those who simply won't play along. The film garnered 6 Oscar nominations, but never fully entered the pop culture canon, maybe because it's uncomfortable, unglamorous, and offers no easy redemption arc. It's the story of a man eaten alive by the very stage that once made him famous, a brutal, necessary look at the industry's fear of raw, unscripted truth.
Next up is Inside Daisy Clover from 1965. This film is like a glittering dagger aimed straight at the heart of the studio system. Natalie Wood plays Daisy, a tomboy plucked from obscurity and transformed into a manufactured starlet by an industry that just chews up her identity and spits out a product. Directed by Robert Mulligan, it's a glossy, technicolor nightmare that actually hides its bitterness beneath all those glamorous surfaces. At the time, it was rejected by audiences and critics for being too strange, too cynical, and too ahead of its time. But looking back, Inside Daisy Clover is an unflinching portrait of the machinery that strips away individuality, turning young artists into hollow commodities. Wood's performance is raw, haunted, and incredibly self-aware, culminating in a breakdown scene that still feels jarringly modern. This is not a film about fame. It's about annihilation, about what's left of a person once the dream factory finishes its work.
Get ready for Day of the Locust from 1975. This film is a grotesque, unsettling fever dream of desperation, decay, and the violent underbelly of 1930s Hollywood. Directed by John Schlesinger, it follows a whole cast of nobodies, actors, set designers, outcasts, who orbit the industry's dazzling facade, yearning to be seen. Donald Sutherland's portrayal of Homer Simpson, a man slowly unraveling under the weight of his own loneliness, is haunting and deeply uncomfortable. The film was rejected by audiences and confused critics upon release. Too surreal, too nihilistic, but today it feels eerily prophetic, exposing not just the emptiness behind the silver screen, but the rage that festers in the ignored and discarded. The film builds toward one of cinema's most chaotic and disturbing climaxes, forcing viewers to confront the sheer consequences of Hollywood's broken promises. Day of the Locust doesn't just suggest Hollywood is corrupt, it screams it, all while everyone keeps smiling. A forgotten, essential nightmare.
Moving on to a deceptively charming comedy, My Favorite Year from 1982. This film hides a bittersweet reflection on faded fame, personal failure, and the messy realities behind the legends of Hollywood's golden age. Peter O'Toole plays Alan Swan, a swashbuckling movie star whose off-screen life is a drunken spiral of self-sabotage. Behind this slapstick humor is a story about meeting your heroes and realizing they are, in fact, fragile, insecure, and hollowed out by years in the spotlight. Directed by Richard Benjamin and produced by Mel Brooks, the film really captures the chaotic, live-wire energy of 1950s television. But it's Swan's crumbling bravado that gives the film its soul. Though it was modestly successful, My Favorite Year quickly faded from cultural conversation, perhaps because it reveals the painful gap between public persona and private despair. It's not just nostalgia, it's a bruised, affectionate goodbye to a dying breed of Hollywood legend.
And now let's talk about François Truffaut's Day for Night from 1973. This is one of cinema's most honest and melancholic portraits of filmmaking as both art and survival. Truffaut himself plays the director, juggling fragile egos, personal crises, and on-set disasters, all while pretending everything's absolutely fine. The film celebrates the craft of filmmaking, but beneath the charms is a story of quiet burnout, emotional exhaustion, and the constant compromises that come with creating illusions for a living. It won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, but mainstream audiences largely ignored it, dismissing it as a soft, inside Hollywood story. Yet, its patient, tender gaze on the chaos behind the camera makes it timeless. It's not a glossy ode to cinema. It's about the barely held-together reality beneath the carefully choreographed fantasy. A forgotten, essential portrait of creative people clinging to their work while everything else falls apart.
Here we have The Barefoot Contessa from 1954. This might look like old Hollywood glamour, all gowns and starlets, but underneath it all is a bitter, tragic eulogy for women devoured by the film industry. Ava Gardner plays Maria Vargas, a Spanish dancer turned movie star whose life unfolds through the fractured, biased recollections of the men who controlled her. Directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz, the film feels like a wake, cold, somber, and filled with half-truths and regrets. While not a box office failure, the film quickly faded, perhaps because it dared to question the glamorous fantasies Hollywood was built on. Gardner's performance is heartbreaking, truly capturing the loneliness of being forever seen but never truly known. The Barefoot Contessa isn't about fame. It's about the erasure of identity under the gaze of a machine that only wants beauty, silence, and obedience. A haunting, forgotten classic that lingers like the silence after applause.
Oh, get ready for Living in Oblivion from 1995. This film is an indie filmmaker's absolute nightmare, captured in excruciating, hilarious detail. Steve Buscemi plays a frazzled director trying to make his passion project while everything goes wrong. Lights flicker, actors forget lines, egos clash, and reality just blurs into chaotic breakdowns. Directed by Tom DeCillo, who clearly poured his own years of frustration into the film, it's less a comedy and more a therapy session for anyone who's ever tried to create something with no money, no support, and a set filled with chaos.
The film was a festival hit, but stayed niche, maybe too specific, too inside Hollywood for the mainstream. But that's exactly why it resonates today. It's not about the dream. It's about the nightmare behind the dream, the exhaustion, the compromise, and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, the next scene will work. A painfully accurate, overlooked gem about filmmaking's brutal underbelly.
Now we come to Star 80 from 1983. This is one of the most harrowing, uncomfortable dissections of control, exploitation, and Hollywood's obsession with image ever put on screen. Based on the real-life murder of Playboy model Dorothy Stratton, the film follows the toxic, spiraling relationship between Dorothy, played by Mariel Hemingway, and her possessive husband, Paul Snider, played by Eric Roberts. Directed by Bob Fosse, the film jumps timelines and absolutely refuses to sanitize the horror, forcing audiences to sit in the discomfort of watching a woman's life reduced to a product and, ultimately, a tragedy. Roberts delivers a performance so disturbing it borders on unbearable. While critics praised the film, audiences largely rejected it. It was too raw, too soon, too brutal. But Star 80 refuses to let you look away from the darker corners of fame, sex, and control. It's not about a star's rise and fall. It's about how obsession and exploitation turn people into commodities and casualties.
And now, perhaps the definitive film about the grotesque decay lurking behind Hollywood's shimmering facade, Sunset Boulevard from 1950. Billy Wilder's noir classic follows Joe Gillis, a down-on-his-luck screenwriter who becomes ensnared in the chilling delusions of faded silent-era star Norma Desmond. Gloria Swanson's portrayal of Desmond, equal parts tragic, terrifying, and pitiful, is truly one of cinema's most iconic indictments of stardom's cruel erosion of identity. The film's cynical, brutal takedown of Hollywood's obsession with youth and relevance was bold, even in 1950, but it was initially misunderstood by some as mere melodrama. Over time, it has become a cult study in decay, power dynamics, and the intense loneliness of being discarded by an industry that only worships the new. Sunset Boulevard doesn't just pull back the curtain. It leaves you stranded in the ruins, a film that still stings today. It's not a love letter to Hollywood.
Let's switch gears a bit for The Player from 1992. This is Robert Altman's razor-sharp, self-aware satire of the Hollywood studio system, an industry where art is absolutely crushed under the weight of money, image, and ruthless ambition. Tim Robbins plays Griffin Mill, a smug, amoral executive who becomes entangled in a murder cover-up, all while navigating the backstabbing world of pitch meetings, fake smiles, and endless betrayals. Altman turns the film into an inside joke-laden carnival of cameos and industry references. But beneath the humor is a scathing commentary on how Hollywood devours creativity and humanity. It was acclaimed by critics, yet outside cinephile circles, The Player is often forgotten in favor of more glamorous films about Hollywood. But it remains one of the most honest portrayals of the business, where even murder becomes just another storyline. A forgotten classic that doesn't just satirize the system, it exposes its soulless, cannibalistic core.
Oh, now for a truly special one. Tim Burton's Ed Wood from 1994. This film is a joyous yet heartbreaking tribute to the worst director of all time, and a film that quietly reveals Hollywood's disdain for those who dare to dream beyond their limits. Johnny Depp plays the eternally optimistic Ed Wood, a man whose love for filmmaking is unmatched by his talent. Burton presents him with such affection, but also lays bare the cruel indifference of an industry that both mocks and ignores the outcasts. Despite critical acclaim, including Martin Landau's Oscar-winning portrayal of Bela Lugosi, Ed Wood remains underappreciated, often dismissed as quirky or niche. Yet it's one of the most moving explorations of artistic failure, delusion, and the desperate hunger for validation in an industry that shuns the misfits. Ed Wood doesn't laugh at its subject, it mourns him, showing how the line between passion and delusion can blur under Hollywood's harsh spotlight.
Now, this isn't a fictional film, but few movies expose the madness behind the scenes of filmmaking like Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse from 1991. This raw documentary chronicles the chaotic, near-disastrous production of Apocalypse Now. It shows Francis Ford Coppola battling weather, actors, and his own unraveling sanity as the film spirals utterly out of control. Shot by Eleanor Coppola, this isn't just about making a movie, it's about the way Hollywood can consume a creator whole. Coppola himself says, and I quote, "We had access to too much money, too much equipment, and little by little, we went insane." The film was critically acclaimed, but remains a cult item, perhaps because it's too honest, too uncomfortable, revealing the blurred line between genius and self-destruction. It strips away the glamour of the auteur myth and shows filmmaking as a war on your soul, your mind, your marriage. A brutal must-see for anyone who romanticizes the creative process.
Let's lighten the mood just a tiny bit with the Coen brothers' Hail Caesar from 2016. This is a deceptively breezy, hyper-stylized comedy that, believe it or not, hides a venomous critique of 1950s Hollywood studio hypocrisy, control, and paranoia. While some dismissed it as lightweight, it's a biting portrait of a system that polished every image while crushing dissent and erasing personal identity. Josh Brolin plays Eddie Mannix, a fixer who keeps the studio's dirty secrets under wraps while stars, directors, and even communists run amok. Underneath the musical numbers and clever dialogue is a story about exhaustion, compromise, and the invisible labor that keeps the Hollywood machine turning. Though it received decent reviews, Hail Caesar was overlooked by mainstream audiences, misunderstood as a simple period romp. In truth, it's a love-hate letter to the Golden Age, a world of shiny surfaces masking systemic rot. It shows Hollywood as a dream factory built on lies, contracts, and compromises. A smart, bitter, underrated gem.
Now prepare yourself for David Lynch's Mulholland Drive from 2001. This film is a hypnotic, unsettling descent into the broken machinery of Hollywood dreams. Initially dismissed by some as incomprehensible, the film has since been recognized as a masterpiece, but still remains polarizing and, for many, elusive. Naomi Watts gives a devastating performance as an aspiring actress who tumbles down a rabbit hole of betrayal, delusion, and self-erasure. Lynch paints Los Angeles as a seductive, nightmarish labyrinth where dreams curdle into horror and nothing is truly what it seems. Beneath the film's surrealism lies a scathing commentary on the brutal commodification of identity, the erasure of self in the pursuit of fame, and the soul-shattering price of failure in Hollywood's illusion factory. Mulholland Drive is not a traditional narrative. It's an emotional experience that burns into your psyche, a dark, unforgettable mirror held up to the city of broken dreams.
Let's dive into David Cronenberg's Maps to the Stars from 2014. This is one of the most venomous dissections of celebrity culture ever filmed, yet it remains largely ignored by mainstream audiences. The film follows a deeply dysfunctional Hollywood family, including a washed-up child star and a scarred personal assistant, as their lives spiral into surreal, violent collapse. Julianne Moore delivers a fearless, grotesque performance as an aging actress desperate to reclaim relevance, truly exposing the industry's obsession with youth, vanity, and cruelty. Cronenberg strips away the glamour of Hollywood and presents it as a toxic wasteland of incestuous relationships, haunted legacies, and emotional rot. Critics praised its boldness, but many found it too bitter, too strange, or too dark to stomach. Maps to the Stars is not a satire. It's a horror story, showing Hollywood as a place where dreams don't just die, they cannibalize themselves. A forgotten nightmare of fame's festering underbelly.
Now this one will make your blood boil. Swimming with Sharks from 1994 is perhaps the most vicious portrait of Hollywood power dynamics ever filmed. Kevin Spacey plays Buddy Ackerman, a monstrous studio executive who torments his assistant, played by Frank Whaley, in a relationship of escalating psychological abuse. Written and directed by George Huang, who clearly drew from his own experiences as an assistant, the film captures the industry's hierarchy of cruelty with razor-sharp precision. Though praised by critics, Swimming with Sharks never crossed into mainstream conversation, perhaps because it dared to show the industry's ugliest truths without sugarcoating them. There's no redemption, no catharsis, just the soul-crushing realization that the abused often become the abusers. In today's post-Me Too world, the film feels even more relevant, exposing the systemic rot and casual brutality that festers behind Hollywood's glossy facades. It's not just about ambition, it's about the human wreckage left behind in the race for power.
All right, let's get chaotic with Blake Edwards' S.O.B. from 1981. This is an acidic, chaotic meta-comedy that skewers the hypocrisies of the Hollywood system like few films dare. After years of making crowd-pleasing hits, Edwards turned his rage toward the studio machine itself, creating a film about a director, clearly modeled on himself, who loses everything trying to make a passion project. SOB is bawdy, mean-spirited, and relentless in its depiction of studio greed, backstabbing agents, and the sheer humiliations artists endure. Julie Andrews, cast against type, famously bears it all in a defiant act of creative rebellion. Though the film was divisive at the time, dismissed by some as bitter and excessive, it now feels prescient, a gleeful, chaotic exposé of Hollywood's suffocating control over creativity. It's a film that laughs through clenched teeth, mocking the industry's absurdity while revealing its emotional toll. A forgotten gem that shows what happens when the dream factory turns on its own.
Can you believe this next one is from 1932? Before A Star is Born, there was What Price Hollywood? This is a pre-code, brutally honest examination of the corrosive relationship between fame, addiction, and self-destruction. Directed by George Cukor, the film follows a young waitress turned star who becomes entangled with a director whose alcoholism and personal demons threaten to drag them both under. For 1932, the film is shockingly frank in its depiction of industry exploitation and the personal cost of stardom. It doesn't romanticize Hollywood, it exposes it as a factory of broken dreams and human casualties. Though critically acclaimed in its day, What Price Hollywood has largely been overshadowed by its more famous successors. Yet it remains a daring, essential look at the price women in the industry are forced to pay for success and visibility. A forgotten trailblazer that still burns with relevance. Its honesty cuts sharper than many films made decades later. Next, we have the Coen brothers' Barton Fink from 1991. This is a nightmarish, claustrophobic descent into the creative and literal hellscape of 1940s Hollywood. John Turturro plays the titular playwright lured west to write screenplays only to find himself trapped in a decaying hotel, battling writer's block, studio indifference, and his own unraveling mind. Beneath its surreal horror and dark humor, Barton Fink is a brutal allegory for the crushing of artistic spirit in the face of Hollywood's soulless machinery. Though it won the Palme d'Or, the film was too esoteric for general audiences and has since become a cult item. It's not a film about making movies, it's about the suffocating, soul-deadening bureaucracy behind them. Barton Fink shows Hollywood as a factory of compromise, where the dream of creative freedom collapses under the weight of deadlines, contracts, and a silent, grinning studio system that consumes artists whole. All right, let's talk about Gus Van Sant's To Die For from 1995. This is a slick, razor-sharp satire that strips away the glamour of fame to reveal its sociopathic core. Nicole Kidman delivers a career-defining performance as Suzanne Stone, a small-town weather reporter who will do anything, literally anything, to get on TV and stay there. Based on a true story, the film skewers America's obsession with celebrity, media manipulation, and the way entertainment culture rewards narcissism and deceit. At the time, To Die For was praised critically but often dismissed as a dark curiosity rather than a biting cultural critique. Yet today, it feels disturbingly prophetic, exposing the machinery that turns tragedy into entertainment and elevates ambition over morality. Kidman's chilling, plastic smile hides a void at the center, a reflection of a culture that confuses fame with success. A forgotten gem that shows the ugly side of the American dream and the cameras that never blink.
Now, for a truly claustrophobic experience, we have The Big Knife from 1955. This is a dialogue-driven indictment of Hollywood's suffocating contracts, moral compromise, and the spiritual death of its stars. Directed by Robert Aldrich and adapted from Clifford Odets' play, it follows Charles Castle, a movie star trapped by a studio head's blackmail and his own cowardice. Jack Palance delivers a tortured performance as a man slowly realizing he's sold not just his art, but his soul. While praised by critics, The Big Knife was too stagey and bleak for mainstream success. Its portrayal of Hollywood as a joyless, tyrannical machine that grinds down individuality and turns men into hollow brands was too bitter for its era, and it still stings today. Forgotten outside of noir and theater enthusiasts, The Big Knife is essential viewing for its brutal honesty about how the industry manipulates, traps, and ultimately destroys those who dare to sign on the dotted line.
Oh, and here's a biting little black comedy,
Mistress from 1992. This film captures the chaos, compromise, and soul-crushing futility of trying to make a personal film within the Hollywood system. Robert Wuhl plays an indie director with a script he loves until investors, agents, and actors twist it beyond all recognition. Featuring Robert De Niro and Martin Landau, the film is a brutally funny look at the endless negotiations, backstabbing, and humiliations artists endure for the chance to tell their story. Though well-received, Mistress was ignored by audiences and forgotten in De Niro's vast filmography. Yet its portrait of the indie filmmaker's struggle against Hollywood's gatekeepers is timeless. It's not about winning, it's about how much of yourself you're willing to give up just to get a movie made. Mistress is a cautionary tale for any dreamer who believes passion alone can survive the meat grinder of the film industry.
And finally, we have Jose Ferrer's The Great Man from 1956. This is an underappreciated, acid-tongued drama that peels back the facade of America's beloved media figures, revealing the hypocrisy, cowardice, and manipulation beneath. Ferrer himself plays a cynical radio journalist tasked with delivering a tribute to a recently deceased TV personality, only to discover the man was, in fact, a monster behind the scenes. The film's sharp, unflinching dialogue slices through the public image to expose the lies and ugliness the media covers up for its icons. The Great Man was ahead of its time, offering a dark, unceremonial look at the entertainment industry's construction of fake heroes for public consumption. Overlooked on release and largely forgotten today, it remains disturbingly relevant in an age where image is everything and truth is whatever sells. It's not about Hollywood glamour. It's about the rotten core. So there you have it, a look at 25 films that show a very different side of Hollywood. What do you think? Did any of these surprise you? Or do you know of any other films that expose the raw truth of the industry?